Hey everyone, Chase Elleby, Joel Williams with Williams Elleby coming to you today with video number 41 in our series of 52 weeks of personal injury. Today we're going to talk about traumatic brain injuries. Joel, what is a traumatic brain injury?
Well, first of all, thank you for the people who have watched our video series so far and requested this specific video, so this is for you. A traumatic brain injury is any injury to the brain. Sometimes they're called closed head injuries. A concussion is probably the most common example of a traumatic brain injury.
All right, and so the next question with any traumatic brain injury, with really any case, is what is a traumatic brain injury worth?
So that is traumatic brain injuries are probably the most difficult personal injury case to value. And that is because a brain injury, whether it's mild, moderate, severe, affects people in so many different ways. So you sort of go back to the traditional notion of, is the injury permanent? Is the injury one that's going to cause you to suffer a long term? What are the severity of the symptoms, right? Because sometimes you just have a headache for a couple of weeks. Those cases are probably not worth a whole lot of money. In other cases, you have memory deficits, you have mood swings, you have the inability to comprehend and analyze difficult information for the rest of your life. And those type cases can be worth millions of dollars.
Right. So I guess just like any injury, depends on the severity. And I think, too, you kind of hit the nail on the head with traumatic brain injuries or head injuries. Most of the time, if you're looking at someone who has a traumatic brain injury, you're probably not going to know just by looking at them, which makes it very difficult, especially in a jury trial setting, right, where a jury's staring at the plaintiff, trying to find any reason to say that that person's either a liar, they're not hurt, whatever it might be, to say, okay, well, this person's asking for a lot of money, but they don't look hurt at all, right? So that also can be another reason why it's very hard to sort of pinpoint the value of traumatic brain injury case. And a lot of times, too, with most, I guess, any sort of injury case, too, is that a lot of it's going to hinge on the treating physician, right? What's the doctor going to say and their opinion about your specific type of injury?
Yeah, and that goes to another point. If you do have a TBI, it's important to not live in your own head, because the value of your case is largely going to be dependent on testimony from what we call before and after witnesses,
right,
which are friends, families, co-workers, bosses that can talk about your abilities before this incident and your abilities after, and specific things that they notice that are causing you problems. That, in addition to your medical professional testimony, your doctors or your neurologist, whoever's treating you for your TBI, is going to go a long way in trying to help the jury understand exactly what your deficits are and exactly what you suffered from. Now, to say all that, within the first year for a TBI case, it is really tough to figure out what the value is going to be, because the last statistic I saw dealing with TBI cases is that 90%, around that number, of brain injury cases resolve themselves within a year.
Right.
So you don't really know whether you've got permanency until after that year mark, because most doctors are not going to be comfortable testifying that the injury is permanent or long-lasting unless those symptoms and issues that you're having last for more, beyond that 1 year mark.
Well, that brings up another good point. A lot of times clients will ask if having a prior concussion will impact a case where they had a concussion, like whether it's a car wreck or a fall. And the answer to that is no, right? Because if you've had a prior concussion, chances are you're more susceptible to have a concussion in the future, and your symptoms are possibly going to be worse. So,
yeah, and that's a lot different than other type injuries, like we see neck and back injuries a lot. If you have arthritis, or if you've had a pre-existing injury or issue with a particular area of your body, sometimes that can cause issues with your personal injury case, but with concussions it's actually different or TBIs it's different, because once you have one, you're more susceptible to them in the future.
Right.
Which is one thing that you should point out to the insurance adjuster when you're trying to settle your case, is that's part of your damage, is that you're more susceptible to receiving that type of injury in the future.
Right.
So another thing to talk about when we're trying to figure out what the value of a TBI case is like, what do we consider when trying to figure out whether you have a $5,000 case or a $5 million case? And those before and after witnesses that we talked about earlier are important, But some specific things that you can look at are performance at work. Do you have to have accommodations made for you at work? If you're a student, do your grades start to fall? Do you have to get on medication in order to be able to concentrate or process the information that you're being given? And so I guess in a student's case, a teacher may be a great witness.
Right. And socially as well, right? It goes back to before and after witnesses. How was this person before? How are they interacting with friends, coworkers, things like that? Are they more reserved? Those are all very, I think, important witnesses.
Yep.
So
really, to sum it all up, if I can tell you anything about what the value of a TBI case is, it would be this. If you have a concussion and basically you have headaches and those symptoms completely resolve within a month, most attorneys are going to tell you that case, it is worth money, but it's probably not worth a whole lot of money.
on the lower end, for sure.
On the lower end. If your symptoms are incredibly severe, migraine type headaches, memory loss, inability to care for yourself, and all of that kind of thing for say 6 months, and then they go away, then your damages are higher, right? If you get past that year mark and you're still having severe symptoms, or even if they're mild symptoms, if your doctor is willing to say that this injury is permanent and it's going to affect you the rest of your life, then you may have a 7-figure case. In other words, you may have a case that's worth $1 million or more. How far into the millions it goes just depends on how bad those symptoms are. Right. If it's just a headache here and there and everything else is fine, might not be a $1 million case. Right. If you have to rely on other people to care for you, or if you can't live by yourself, you may have millions and millions of dollars worth of damages. So it really depends on how long you suffer, the degree of your suffering, and the nature of the suffering, along with the witnesses, the before and after witnesses, and what your medical professionals are willing to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, to keep in mind, because what I hit on earlier is the fact that when you look at someone, or even the medical bills and things like that, they're not going to be that high. The person's not going to look that injured. Getting those higher recoveries in those types of cases are going to almost require a jury trial at the end of the day, because most adjusters and things like that, when they're assessing these cases and looking at sort of the hard numbers, they're like, well, Johnny only has $10,000 worth of medical bills. Well, yeah, that might be the case, because there's really nothing Johnny can do other than live with the condition that he now has due to the negligence of someone else. So another thing to keep in mind. So
if you're trying to negotiate a TBI case and the adjuster tells you, well, your medical bills are only $10,000, and they're trying to value your case based on that, hopefully you already have an attorney, but you better get an attorney at that point, because that adjuster doesn't know what they're dealing with.
Right, exactly. Lost cause.
All right, well, that wraps it up for the value of TBI cases. If the video has been helpful to you, we'd appreciate you giving us a thumbs up or sharing it with your friends. Otherwise, we will see you next week for video number 42, and we'll deal with the value of neck injury cases.